Sometimes life sets us apart, pulls us away from our usual rhythms, from friends, from familiar environments. It feels unsettling, even lonely. But have you ever wondered, could this be God at work in your life, setting you apart for a reason that is beyond what you can see right now? Isolation isn't a punishment, it's a powerful preparation. When God wants to do something extraordinary in your life, he often needs your full attention. And so he draws you into a place of solitude. This is where distractions are removed, where you can hear his voice without the noise of opinions, where you can see your own heart more clearly. Isolation deepens our trust and faith. In the stillness, when there is no one else to rely on, no other voice guiding us, we learn to depend on God in a new way. And faith grows. Faith is not about the seen, but the unseen. In these times, God asks, will you trust me even when you can't see the full plan? That trust is foundational. It's what every blessing rests upon. In isolation, there is clarity of purpose. When God is preparing to bless you, he often reveals your purpose with sharpness and conviction. You begin to see not only who you are, but also what you are called to become. He refines the vision and shows you the next steps, not in the crowded company of others, but in that sacred, quiet place where your spirit is tuned to listen. Every season of isolation carries its tests. There are moments of doubt, struggle, and sometimes pain. But remember, tests are never wasted. They build resilience. They prepare you to carry the blessings God has in store. The wilderness is where our faith is forged, where we find strength we didn't know we had. Isolation is also protection. Sometimes God pulls us away to protect us from influences that could deter us from his purpose. We may not realize it, but some people and environments can dilute God's vision for us. He shields us in these times, preserving the work he's doing within us. And in that stillness, we receive revelation. When our spirit is quiet, God speaks, revealing truths and directions that we may have missed in the clamor of daily life. He places new desires, new insights, and sometimes a new vision for what lies ahead. These are the seeds of the blessing to come. As this season ends, we emerge changed, carrying a new identity, one that is ready for the blessings ahead. God doesn't isolate to leave us stranded. He isolates to make us ready, to make us strong. So if you're in a season of solitude, don't fear it. Embrace it, for it's in this place that God is preparing you, shaping you, and ultimately preparing to bless you beyond what you can imagine. Isolation can feel like a wilderness, an empty place that's difficult to endure. But what if we shifted our perspective and saw it as part of God's grand design? Often in seasons of solitude, God is working to prepare us. In these times, we're drawn away from the noise and the constant chatter of the world around us. We might feel separated from our routines, our relationships, and even our comforts. But here lies the beauty of isolation. It strips away everything that distracts, leaving us with only what truly matters. It's in this emptiness that God molds, shapes, and prepares us for a purpose we cannot yet see. Think about it. When you're surrounded by others, your mind and heart are easily influenced by the opinions, expectations, and energies of those around you. It's easy to adopt their beliefs and bend to their desires. But in isolation, you are left with just you and God. And in that solitude, he works within you. He draws out what's been dormant and highlights areas that need refining. There's no escaping the self-examination that comes in times like this. God uses these moments to reveal our character, to show us both our strengths and our weaknesses, to refine the very foundation of who we are. When God calls us to greater things, he doesn't simply place those blessings in our hands. Instead, he takes us on a journey that prepares us to handle them. Imagine if a great leader had been thrust into their position without any formative years, without hardship or growth. They would lack the depth, wisdom, and resilience needed to fulfill their role. The same is true for us. Before we step into our calling, God prepares us. He tests our patience, teaches us humility, and builds our faith. He places in us the qualities we need to sustain the blessings and responsibilities ahead. Isolation is his workshop, where he does the essential work that can't happen in a crowd. Consider how isolation led to preparation in the lives of those God called. Look at Moses, who was drawn away from everything he knew, spending 40 years in the desert before leading his people to freedom. Or think of Joseph, who spent years separated from his family, seemingly abandoned, yet being molded through hardship to eventually become a wise and compassionate leader. Each of these figures found themselves in seasons of separation, and while they may have wondered why, God was preparing them for a purpose they couldn't yet comprehend. And so, if you find yourself in a time of isolation, remember that God is doing a work within you that will not only benefit you, but also those around you. He is taking this time to root out doubt, strengthen your resolve, and prepare your heart. This is a season not to run from, but to embrace. It may feel uncomfortable, it may feel lonely, but trust that God is using it as a tool to prepare you for something more, something greater than you could ever imagine. Let this time be one where you grow closer to Him, allow Him to shape you, and trust that His preparation will bring you to a place of unimaginable blessing. In the quiet spaces of isolation, our faith is put to the test, and our trust in God is called into a deeper place. When we're surrounded by the familiar, our friends, our routines, our constant comforts, it's easy to say we trust in God. But when these are removed, we often find ourselves questioning, searching, and stretching. This is where faith, real and unshakable faith, begins to take root. In isolation, when we feel we have no one else to rely on, God invites us to lean entirely on Him, to discover that He is the ultimate source of our strength. Trust isn't something we fully experience when things are predictable and easy. True trust is built when circumstances are uncertain and answers don't come immediately. In these moments, God invites us to hold on to His promises, even when they seem distant. He teaches us that He is constant, even when everything else around us changes. And with each step, our trust grows, becoming less about what we can see and more about who God is. In this way, isolation becomes a time of divine revelation, where God shows us that He is not only a provider, but a sustainer, a companion, and an unfailing guide. When we lean into this time of solitude, our faith is refined like gold in the fire. We might find ourselves facing doubt, wrestling with questions, or even struggling with fear. But in that very struggle, we learn that faith isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to trust God even in the presence of it. This process teaches us resilience. We learn that faith is more than a feeling, it's an active decision, a commitment to keep going, to keep believing, and to keep trusting in the one who has brought us this far. It's in these seasons that God becomes more than an idea or a distant hope. He becomes our closest confidant, our anchor. With each passing day, as we turn to Him in prayer, as we pour out our hearts, we come to know Him in a more intimate way. And this is where transformation happens. We learn that God's timing, while often different from our own, is perfect. We see that His ways, even when they don't make sense to us, are good. And as our trust grows, so does our ability to find peace even in uncertainty, even in solitude. Through isolation, God prepares us not only for the blessings ahead, but for a life of enduring faith. He plants a trust within us that isn't dependent on circumstances, a faith that remains steady through every trial. And when the season of solitude ends, we emerge with a deeper trust in God and a stronger faith that will sustain us whatever the future may hold. In the stillness of isolation, clarity begins to emerge in ways that are impossible amid constant noise and distractions. When we're pulled away from the opinions, expectations, and endless busyness of life, we finally have the opportunity to see with spiritual eyes. It's here in the quiet that God often reveals His unique purpose for us. We are no longer clouded by what others want us to be or by what we've convinced ourselves we should be. Instead, we begin to see a vision that is uniquely crafted for us, a path laid out by God's hand. This time of solitude serves as a clearing of the mind and heart. It allows us to confront the things we may have ignored or avoided, and it brings to the surface our true desires, our authentic strengths, and our core values. As layers of confusion or misdirection fall away, we are left with a sense of focus, a direction that resonates with our spirit. We gain insight into the gifts and abilities that God has placed within us, recognizing them not merely as talents, but as tools for a greater purpose. This newfound understanding allows us to identify the steps we need to take and the disciplines we need to build to fulfill that purpose. Clarity of purpose is a powerful shift. It moves us from a place of wondering and waiting to a place of intentional action. When we understand what we are called to do, we become aligned with God's design, and that alignment brings a sense of peace and determination. We no longer chase after every opportunity or follow every path. Instead, we become more focused, more selective, knowing that each step we take should contribute to the purpose that God has revealed to us. This focus transforms our actions, our relationships, and our priorities, shaping us into people who are not only purpose-driven but spiritually anchored. Isolation is not meant to be a permanent state but a preparatory one. It's a time when God clarifies the vision so that we can move forward with confidence when we are brought back into the world. We no longer operate from a place of uncertainty or insecurity because we know who we are and what we are meant to do. And as we re-enter life equipped with a sense of purpose, we find ourselves less easily swayed by external pressures. Our goals become clearer, our intentions more defined, and our faith stronger, grounded in the knowledge that we are following a path set before us by God. In this clarity, God's voice becomes unmistakable, guiding us not only through the big decisions, but through the daily choices that shape our lives. We come to understand that every experience, every moment of isolation, every revelation has been part of the preparation. With purpose as our compass, we can navigate life's challenges, knowing that we are moving towards something meaningful, something that God has destined uniquely for us. Clarity of purpose, born in the quiet of isolation, becomes the foundation on which we build a life that honors God and fulfills the call He has placed within us. When we look back at those who walk closely with God, we often find that before each blessing, there was a season of testing. These tests aren't designed to break us, but to refine us, to prepare us for the weight of the blessings God intends to give. If blessings arrive without preparation, we might lack the resilience, wisdom, or humility to handle them well. God, in His wisdom, allows us to experience trials that shape our character, strengthen our faith, and prepare us to receive what He has planned. Tests come in many forms, sometimes through delayed answers to our prayers, challenging circumstances, or seemingly impossible obstacles. These moments feel uncomfortable, and we may wonder why things aren't easier or clearer. But these trials teach us endurance. They teach us to persevere, to press forward even when we're uncertain, and to hold on to God's promises when everything around us says otherwise. Through these tests, our faith becomes deeper, moving from something we talk about to something we live out. Each test strips away the layers of self-doubt, impatience, or pride, bringing us face to face with areas we need to surrender to God. They reveal what's really in our hearts, allowing us to confront and overcome the weaknesses that could hinder us in times of blessing. We begin to understand that true strength is born from vulnerability, and that real trust in God isn't rooted in an easy life, but in a life that has been refined through challenges. The testing process is uncomfortable, but it produces a resilience that can't be achieved any other way. These tests also foster humility. They remind us that we are dependent on God, that the blessings we seek are not by our own doing, but by His grace. In times of struggle, we are reminded that without Him, we can do nothing. And as we humble ourselves, God's grace becomes our strength, enabling us to face each challenge with courage and faith. Humility keeps us grounded, ensuring that when the blessing comes, we remember who provided it and why. Tests also build patience, a quality necessary for stewarding any blessing. Waiting seasons teach us to lean into God's timing, to recognize that His plans unfold exactly when they're meant to. As we grow in patience, we learn to appreciate the journey rather than just the destination. We see the value in each step, realizing that each lesson, each hardship, and each breakthrough was necessary to prepare us for what's to come. When the season of testing ends and the blessing arrives, we stand with greater wisdom, with an appreciation for what we've been given, and with a heart ready to handle the responsibility that comes with it. God's tests before blessings are not barriers, they are bridges. They are the very process that strengthens and readies us to step into the fullness of what He has prepared. We emerge from these tests not only blessed but transformed, equipped to carry the blessings with purpose, gratitude, and humility. The wilderness is a place that seems barren, unfamiliar, even desolate, yet it is precisely here that some of the most profound growth occurs. When life is stripped of its comforts, routines, and distractions, we're left with only ourselves and God. In the wilderness, our reliance shifts. The things we used to lean on disappear, and we find ourselves reaching out to God in a way we never did before. It's here in the heart of the wilderness that God often does his most transformative work in us. In these times, growth isn't always visible. It can feel slow, even invisible, as we struggle through questions and challenges. But it is deep and foundational, working within us at a level that prepares us for the journey ahead. God uses this season to build our inner strength, our character, and our resolve. Like a plant that takes root in rocky soil, our faith develops a resilience that can withstand future storms. We're stretched beyond what we thought possible, and each trial or hardship becomes an opportunity for our faith to grow, for our spirit to be strengthened, and for our trust in God to deepen. Growth in the wilderness also involves a stripping away of things that no longer serve us. Old habits, mindsets, and fears are brought to the surface, allowing us to confront them with courage and surrender them to God. We begin to shed the weight of past hurts, doubts, and insecurities that might have held us back. In the wilderness, God prunes us, cutting away what isn't needed so that new growth can emerge. We find ourselves refined like gold in the fire until only what is strong, pure, and aligned with God's purpose remains. As we continue in this place, we learn to listen differently. The noise of life fades, and we become more sensitive to the quiet, steady voice of God. We begin to discern his guidance in ways we might have missed before, understanding that he is our ultimate provider, our shelter, our guide. This intimacy with God, developed in the wilderness, becomes a source of strength we carry with us long after we leave this season behind. And though the wilderness is not a place anyone chooses to stay forever, it becomes clear that this time is not wasted. Each day spent here molds us, preparing us for the purpose and blessings that lie ahead. The lessons learned in the wilderness don't fade, they form the very foundation of our future. We emerge from this season changed, equipped with a resilience and strength that can only be built in the most challenging environments. In this way, growth in the wilderness becomes the very groundwork for all that God has called us to be and do, setting us on a path with a heart strengthened by solitude and a faith deepened by dependence on him alone. Isolation often serves as a shield, a time when God removes us from the noise, influences, and pressures that can cloud our purpose. When we're constantly surrounded by others' opinions, their expectations, and even well-meaning advice, it becomes challenging to hear the inner voice of wisdom and the guidance God wants to provide. Isolation becomes a space of clarity where distractions are minimized and our focus is shifted entirely to what God is doing within us. This period of protection allows us to redefine our priorities, center ourselves on what truly matters, and discern which voices are worth listening to and which need to be set aside. In this protective solitude, God strengthens our discernment, teaching us how to recognize what aligns with his plan and what may lead us astray. Without the usual crowd around us, we're better able to filter out influences that may be subtly destructive, things that may seem harmless on the surface, but can quietly chip away at our faith, values, or confidence. This removal from external voices gives us the chance to realign ourselves spiritually and recognize which relationships, habits, or mindsets need to be adjusted or even left behind. We grow stronger in our sense of self, less susceptible to validation from others, and more rooted in the understanding of who we are in God's eyes. During this time, God also reveals the areas where we may have unknowingly allowed the values and opinions of others to shape us. It can be easy to live according to what we think others expect or what society deems successful or admirable. Isolation exposes these influences, giving us the time and space to examine our beliefs, motivations, and decisions. This deepened awareness allows us to set healthier boundaries and cultivate a mindset grounded in spiritual truths rather than societal pressures. We develop a clearer understanding of our own purpose, values, and goals, untainted by the constant influence of external opinions. Isolation provides an opportunity to strengthen our inner convictions, to solidify what we believe and stand for. In this quiet space, we find that we can't rely on others' affirmations or reassurances. Instead, we learn to draw strength directly from God. As we seek his guidance and embrace the truths found in his word, we build a foundation that cannot be easily shaken by external pressures. This foundation becomes a source of stability, a reservoir of strength we can draw on when we're reintroduced into environments where influences and opinions abound. With this strength, we emerge from isolation less susceptible to doubt or compromise, firmly rooted in our faith and in the values that God has refined within us. Ultimately, this period of protection isn't about keeping us from people permanently, but about preparing us to engage with others more purposefully. By stepping back, we develop the resilience to remain true to our calling, even when others may not understand or support it. We become equipped to hold fast to our convictions, to resist the pull of peer pressure or societal expectations, and to confidently make decisions aligned with God's will. When we finally re-enter the world, we carry with us a renewed sense of purpose and a deepened awareness of how to guard ourselves from influences that don't serve our calling. This protective isolation is not a punishment, but a divine preservation. God understands that to fulfill our purpose, we need this space to grow, to listen, and to be fortified in ways that only solitude allows. By protecting us from external influences, He's not only safeguarding our spirit, but also empowering us to re-engage with the world with a clearer sense of self, a stronger foundation, and an unwavering commitment to the path He set before us. And when the time comes to step forward, we do so with the strength to honor our purpose, regardless of the influences around us. In the quiet and solitude of isolation, there exists a unique openness to receiving divine revelation. This period becomes a sacred space where distractions fade, creating room for God's voice to be heard more clearly and deeply than ever before. When we're removed from the routines, demands, and noise of daily life, our spirit becomes more receptive to insights and truths that God has been longing to reveal to us. It's in this stillness that we find ourselves more attuned to His whispers, sensing guidance and wisdom that often go unnoticed in the busyness of our usual environments. Divine revelation during times of isolation is not just about understanding new information, it's about a transformation of perspective. God uses these moments to shift our vision, helping us see situations, people, and even ourselves through a lens of spiritual clarity. Our understanding deepens and we start to recognize how past experiences, current struggles, and future hopes are interconnected within God's larger plan for our lives. This revelation often unveils purposes or callings that were previously hidden, showing us a path that is uniquely ours, crafted by God's hand. Isolation allows us to ask deeper questions and be open to answers that challenge us to grow. Sometimes divine revelation involves God revealing areas of our lives that need healing, restoration, or change. We may be prompted to let go of old fears, embrace forgiveness, or step into new roles that require courage and faith. This revelation can feel challenging as it often illuminates parts of ourselves we may have ignored or avoided, yet it is always rooted in God's desire to prepare us for the blessings and responsibilities He has ahead. In receiving divine revelation, we gain more than just knowledge, we receive spiritual clarity and direction. God reveals not only the next steps, but also the reasons behind them, helping us understand the why behind the season we're in. This understanding brings a sense of peace, even if the path ahead seems uncertain or difficult. With revelation comes reassurance, a reminder that God's hand is guiding us and that every experience, every moment of waiting, every trial has a purpose that serves our growth and His greater plan. Divine revelation also equips us with wisdom that strengthens our faith. We become more confident in God's timing and less anxious about immediate answers or visible progress. We learn to walk by faith, trusting that the insights He has provided are leading us towards a future He has already prepared. This newfound wisdom becomes a source of inner strength, enabling us to navigate challenges with a spirit of peace and an assurance that God's plan will unfold perfectly in its own time. Ultimately, the revelations received during isolation become a foundation that supports us long after this season ends. As we re-enter life's busyness, we carry with us the truths God has planted within our spirit, truths that can't be shaken by circumstances or external pressures. We come to understand that the isolation was not a time of emptiness, but a time of profound spiritual filling, a season in which God chose to impart revelations that will shape our purpose, guide our decisions, and keep us grounded in Him. These divine insights allow us to see beyond the immediate and trust in the eternal, helping us to live with a sense of purpose, vision, and faith that is unwavering. In receiving divine revelation, we don't just gain knowledge, we are transformed, equipped to step into the world with a renewed spirit, ready to fulfill the calling God has placed on our lives. This revelation becomes a source of light within us, guiding us through future seasons and reminding us always of the profound work God accomplished in the stillness of isolation. Emerging from a season of isolation often feels like stepping into a new identity, a self that has been refined, reshaped, and redefined by God's hand. Isolation strips away the external labels and titles we might rely on, bringing us face to face with the core of who we are. In that place, without the need for pretense or performance, God begins to reshape our identity. Old insecurities, doubts, and misunderstandings about ourselves are brought to light, not to weaken us, but to be healed and transformed. The isolation period becomes a time of spiritual reformation, where God dismantles what we once thought defined us and builds in its place a truer, deeper sense of self aligned with His vision. Through this process, we learn that our identity is not rooted in achievements, relationships, or the opinions of others. Instead, we discover that our worth is founded solely on the fact that we are God's creation, beloved and purposefully designed. Isolation allows us to step away from the expectations others place on us and gives us the chance to explore who we are from a place of authenticity. We begin to see ourselves through God's eyes, recognizing strengths, gifts, and even callings that may have been dormant. This redefined identity is one of empowerment, rooted not in what we do, but in who we are in Him. As God shapes this new identity, He often reawakens dreams or purposes that we may have set aside, overlooked, or doubted. Our time alone with Him rekindles the vision for the life He intends us to live. In the quiet of isolation, we confront the fears and limitations that may have previously held us back. God helps us see that our limitations, when surrendered to Him, are opportunities for His strength to shine. We emerge with a bolder outlook, more aware of our potential and more determined to live in a way that honors this new understanding of ourselves. In embracing this identity, we're also filled with a new confidence. This isn't a confidence based on our abilities, but rather a profound trust in God's plans. We come to realize that He has equipped us for every task and challenge ahead, and that the struggles we faced in isolation were not meant to break us, but to mold us into vessels capable of carrying out His will. We see our past not as a series of setbacks, but as a foundation on which God is building something new. This knowledge brings a resilience that anchors us, making us less susceptible to the criticisms or doubts of others, and more committed to pursuing our path with integrity and faith. When the time comes to re-enter the world, we do so with a spirit that feels reborn, as though we have shed an old skin and emerged with a new strength and purpose. This identity is one that no longer seeks validation from the world, because it has been validated by God Himself. We understand that the isolation was not a time of loneliness, but a period of sacred transformation where God was preparing us for a future only He could see. We step forward not with the need to prove ourselves, but with the desire to serve, lead, and love in a way that reflects this journey and honors the identity God has instilled within us. In this emergence, we're no longer defined by the past. Instead, we carry forward the wisdom gained from solitude and the strength that comes from truly knowing ourselves in God's light. We are equipped not only to handle what comes our way, but to thrive, to grow, and to fulfill our calling. We become living testimonies of how God can take a person through a season of isolation and bring them out stronger, wiser, and more grounded than ever before. This new identity is our blessing and our responsibility, a commitment to live fully with purpose as vessels of God's grace and truth in the world. As we reflect on the journey through isolation, we begin to understand its divine purpose. It is not merely a time of loneliness, but a season of sacred transformation where God draws us closer, preparing us for something far greater than we could have imagined. Isolation teaches us resilience, strengthens our faith, brings clarity to our purpose, and ultimately reveals a new identity rooted in Him. It is in the wilderness that we discover our strength, in silence that we hear His voice, and in solitude that we find our true calling. When God removes us from the noise, He invites us to lean in, to grow, and to prepare for blessings yet to come. So if you find yourself in this season, know that it's not a pause, but a process, a time of refining, healing, and receiving divine revelation. Trust that God is at work, laying a foundation within you that will withstand any storm, shaping you for a purpose uniquely yours. And when you finally emerge, you will do so with renewed strength, clarity, and a spirit ready to fulfill the extraordinary path He has set before you. This is not the end, but the beginning of a life transformed, blessed, and empowered by God's hand. Thank you.